Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. I've got Boston College's Amy Kvilhaug on to join the conversation. Excited. Really, I know that like you're really into like personal development, so I'm super pumped about like I can go down that rabbit hole for forever. But before we even get into that, wild or funny story, what you got for everybody?
Okay. Actually, in the time that you asked me the question before we came on air till now, I have two, and they'll be quick.
Okay, yeah.
So the first one was just the one of the more maybe one of my top two moments in my coaching career, which happened, which involves Zoe Hines, our left fielder. Just imagine this: you are losing the game, a very important game to Louisville. It was 1-0. Your
Okay,
your pitcher is throwing a gem, and you're getting no hit,
yeah.
and you're down. Now the count is 1 ball, 2 strikes with 2 outs in the bottom of the seventh. You do have a base runner, and the first swing was horrific in the at bat. The second swing, Zoe fouls off and hits herself in the head. With,
Right.
and so you're just down, thinking, okay, what do we need to do next? You're like, what is going to happen here?
Yeah.
The next swing, she launches the ball over the left field fence, hits the top of the shed, and bounces out for the most exciting, probably walk-off win that I've ever been a part of. And I'm a Boston sports fan, and there have been some moments up here,
Yeah.
whether it's the Patriots or the Red Sox or whatever. And this was a pretty special moment at a time where there was really, the offense was trying to get life going and it was struggling. So that was number one.
Yeah, I love it.
Number two, I'm sitting on a plane going recruiting. 2 weeks ago, heading to Gainesville. I'm sitting in my seat 13C. And somebody needs to get into 13A, and they're like, "Oh, Boston College. You work at Boston College?" Yes, I do. What do you do there? I'm the softball coach. And then there were some other random questions. And he said, "Oh, I actually am the assistant basketball coach at FSU." So we got to chatting a little bit. He was in
Yeah.
13A, I was in 13C. Well, lo and behold, he was I was going to Gainesville recruiting. He was going to FSU. Get back. He had told me he'd gone to the Celtics the night before with Earl Grey, and one thing led to the next. Well, 2 weeks later, he is now a member of the Eagle family as an assistant coach staff. So it's like,
No.
yeah, so you're on the same plane as somebody, not even just on
Yeah.
the same plane, but we're in the same row. And so, he was asking me about like rent prices and housing prices up here. So I was like, something's going on, but you never know. So I didn't pry, but I thought that was just a small world story. So a really exciting story and a small world story.
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
Yeah,
It's funny how the universe works out, right? Like the
I
people
know.
that you meet, next thing you know, it's like they're a colleague of yours, so to speak. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Steve
That's
Smith
awesome.
is his name, Steve Smith. So I wish Steve Smith, Earl Grey, uh, Earl Grant, and the basketball program the best of luck. I was
Yeah.
Earl Grey tea. I'm like, can you have a different name than the tea that I drink sometimes?
Are you from Boston? Is that why like are you die hard? Because
Yeah.
I have a wife from New York and she swears like I know you guys are gonna be arch nemesis because she's like Yankees and Jeter for life, like nothing will change.
Yeah, I am definitely like a diehard Boston fan. Like, and I would say that I am
And a
like
spoiled fan too, a little bit.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. But Patriots, well, and I lived in New York for 12 years, and so I respect the Yankees. Like, you get in there and you get in the heat of the battle, and the fans kind of make it like the battle, like the
Yeah.
players. So I have a lot of respect for Jeter and whatnot. But like living up here, all those Patriot dynasties, and then but Patriots and like um the Red Sox are really kind of like my first love. I'm finally now just getting into the team. They have a pretty fun team this year. They steal bases, they do a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I got into the Celtics series though, and like I like that. What a team! Holy smokes! Like I really started to enjoy. I'm a bandwagoner. I like the Celtics. My dad. I grew up going to like games with like Larry Bird, Kevin
Yeah.
McHale, Robert Parrish. Like I went to those games. My dad brought me to the Garden back in those days, and so I love basketball. I just hadn't followed it, and then I kind of got into the playoffs, and I really kind of fell in love with the team, and we just had our championship parade here on Friday. And so, yeah. And then the Bruins, again,
Yeah.
disappointing loss, but the Panthers, Florida NHL, so good. So,
Yeah. Small world too is so Joe Missoula. I'm a former WVU athlete, and
Yeah.
I was coming in kind of as he was going out, like, so I kind of got to see him like a little bit. It's just kind of like unique to see somebody essentially like almost like my age succeed at such like a high
Oh
level
yeah.
of like something
Yeah.
that kind of fell into his lap a little bit. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah, definitely. It was great. It's been great. So
Yeah, so that's awesome. So going like I want to dive into the rabbit hole of like just kind of like looking at like what you're all about, right? Like in terms of as much as LinkedIn or social media like can tell us, just even some of like your posts just on like leadership and culture and just kind of having like it looks like your own company, so to speak, on
yeah.
like just helping out in that world of high performance mentorship, just guiding people in down the directions that they need. How'd you get into it? What fascinated you with that? And like, I guess just kind of like build up to like where you are now and like what it means for like what you're doing with your program and yeah, just kind of like how you got into personal development.
Yeah. So um I have been a curious soul my whole life. Like I am very curious and I'm most curious about human behavior.
Yeah.
And psychology. I always say, yeah, I've actually applied and was accepted to the mental health counseling program here at Boston College because
Okay.
I am so interested in like, I always want to level up. And for me, that would be my next level up, if you will,
Right.
like, is really diving into techniques to help people, whereas
Hmm.
like when I finish this program, I'll be a licensed mental health counselor, like, and it will be a conflict of interest to do it with my players, but just to have like the understanding, because you technically do work in mental health and in psychology when you're working with your athletes. So just to have like a deeper base of
Hmm.
what I do and what I can provide to people is awesome. And so, but I've really just loved human behavior and my curiosity. Like for me, like the thing that makes the world go round is people.
Right.
And to understand people and maybe what their motivations are, where they're coming from, and why they may behave the way that they do has been such a fascinating topic to me. Like, I will listen to podcasts, read books on all kinds of topics centered around whether it's neuroscience
Yeah.
or addiction,
Yeah.
or like I just finished a book about trauma.
Mm.
And I'm not even in school yet. Like I do this because I'm just sheerly interested in this. And the most fascinating part of it is like you really like your formative years, like from when you're born to like when you're two, like when you're a child, the way that your parents treat you becomes the way that you perceive the world and your reality. And so the challenge there lies for coaching, in my opinion, is like, you get people for 4 years after so much has gone down
Yeah.
that like it's really hard to shift mindsets. So what you really kind of have to do is work to build leadership and just kind of chip away at having people fall in line into the culture that you want to build. So like that's the short part of why I am so into development, because it fascinates me both for developing others and also developing myself. Like I'm a work in progress myself.
Yeah, 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 totally. I think that like the kind of piggybacking off that a little bit is understanding, like you said, because you're essentially a sponge as a kid, right? Like you don't like have a conscious brain yet, so it's just like everything that you're fed, like you have to accept because you can't decide whether that's like reality or not. And so I think that obviously as they get older, like teenage, in your case, like 18 to 22 ish, give or take, um, like challenging them, just asking them like, what do you believe? And I don't think like most people actually know. It's just kind of like, well, I don't really know. I've never really thought about that. And I'm like, well, like maybe like we should start there. And then once you figure out your beliefs, it's like, do you actually want to believe that? Is like, as you've
Yeah,
said, or is this something that's just been hardwired into you? And it can be
yeah,
a major decision in life of like, I'm a Christian or I believe in God to like, I'm just not a good hitter, right? Because of
yeah,
something that somebody told you
yeah.
decades ago.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, really, that is so true. And like, and then you take those two examples that you just gave, and then do you have people who actually do want to be introspective, or do you have people who just kind of want to accept things on a surface level? And that again comes back to, it could come back to something as deep as like some trauma that they've experienced where they've
Yeah.
shut down. Like you could take trauma and you either like shut down or you become like a survivalist and you try to figure things out, which makes you a little bit more curious about things. And so you just have no idea where people are coming from. You're just stepping in like you're like late to the show, and that's what makes it such a challenge. And well, people have the ability to change, they've got to want to change.
Yeah. 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 I love that. So how did that eventually spill over like into coaching, or was it coaching and then you were kind of more curious going down the rabbit holes of like behaviors and beliefs? And because like you said, like I mean business is psychology, right? Like if you understand
Yeah.
psychology you can understand business of
Yeah.
like why people make decisions in the way that
Yeah.
they do. So how did that translate over into coaching, or was it kind of just all like merged together like the whole time? Did you always know that you wanted to get into coaching, or was it more of like the behavioral side of things?
No, I did not know. I was not one of those people. And I coach some of those people who are like, I really want to get into coaching. I was not that. And in fact, I went into coaching believing it was like an extension of keeping softball alive in my life.
Yeah.
And I learned quickly, but you learn quickly, but it takes you forever to study the craft. Like you learn quickly that it is not playing softball. It really is not it is a completely separate industry, honestly. Like being on the other side of it is so different. You get to watch the same game, but you see it through such different eyes because you're looking through it as the leader for 25 people as opposed to yourself who is just working on like personal development of your
Yeah.
skill. And so, you learn that quickly, but to learn how to do that for me is like been a lifelong career journey, like, and so I'm the type of person looking to better myself.
Yeah.
And so now it's turned into how can I better myself to be better for the people around me? And that's really how this has evolved. And it's evolved from like learning how to hear hard criticisms and take feedback from people, and then it's also like we coaches talk a lot about how hard it is at the end of the year to see some of these evaluations. And it is, trust me, like sometimes I go into a downward spiral about some of the things that, you hear. But like in learning how, in my personal development, I've learned how to take constructive feedback as opposed to just bitter,
Yeah.
bitter, like sour grapes. And you learn how to differentiate, and then you take the good constructive stuff and work towards bettering the the program. And so like one of the things last year that was feedback was that the kids wanted more connection with like the
Mm.
coaching staff. And so I took measures to do that, and I worked really hard on that. I became vulnerable, much more vulnerable than ever, which I think is easier. If you see coaches, we tend to mellow out as we age. I think everybody may say that to some level. And then this year, one of the things that we're talking about is just shutting down negative talk in the locker room. And it's
Yeah.
player led. It's got to be more player led. And we've talked a lot about player led because I've really based a lot of the things that we've been doing in the last couple of years off of the Twin Thieves, which is a great book. A lot of my social content lately, especially
Yeah. 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 I saw
reading.
that.
I'm rereading the book again, and I have all of our incomers reading the book, and I want to meet with them just to kind of go over some of the themes that we're going to utilize from the book. But I just think that it's constant evolution, and then getting back to the locker room stuff, like the quote is bad teams no one leads, good teams coaches lead, great teams players lead.
Right.
But players leading entails a lot of hard discussions
Yeah.
sometimes, like
Absolutely.
until the change has been made, so if you're going to allow like complaints about practice or complaints about say what what I'm doing or what my assistants are doing, like if you're going to let that happen, then you're, you know, number one, I would challenge you with, can you get curious instead of like letting that go? Like get curious, like ask people why. If they're complaining, well, why? well, do you have any solutions to bring to the table? No. Well, then stop complaining. Like,
Yeah.
figure it out. And then the one thing that we've taken from that book is deliver the mail to the right address, right? If they have a problem with practice times or with the way things that are going with, how I might be running things, or like whatever their problem is, they need to come talk to me. Like, we
Right.
need to be, because I can't be part of the solution if I don't know that you're having a problem. So you just spewing vinegar all over the locker room is doing no good. And so it's like it's teaching people how to have hard conversations that aren't bad, like that don't have to be bad things. They're just productive conversations.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like in my interactions with a lot of that age group and athletes is they view it as like confrontation. I'm like, it's not confrontation. It's
No,
literally just communication. There's a very
yeah,
big difference in like communication and confrontation. And it's like they think that because they disagree with something that you're doing, that if they come in and talk to you about it, it's immediate confrontation. I'm like, now language matters, how you present it. You can't go in there and be like, "You're an idiot. What are you doing, dumbass?" Blah, right? Like that doesn't get the message across. But like, hey, like, have you thought about X? Because like we're really struggling with A, B, and C. And it's like, I know that this is the way that you've always done things, but like this team, and we've been talking a lot, and like just bringing light to those things
yeah,
is like, and you may not always agree with it, right? It may be a
sure,
back and forth communication
sure.
discussion. But I think that, yeah, they view that anything that two people don't see eye to eye on, it's immediate confrontation. And I'm like, to your point, that is how people grow. Because if you only hang out with people that see the world exactly like you do it, then like you kind of stay on that same playing field. It's
Yeah.
like you want to be around people that see the world um differently. So how do you going back to, because I love that the concept of like curiosity, like asking questions, whether that be, Coach, why are we doing this? To just literally any questions. How is it that you go about really encouraging questions? Because I think that sometimes, again, they view you as like mom, like you are like the dictator and the ruler, and you hold the stick to my destiny, so to speak. How do you encourage them to just speak up and ask questions and not gossip, so to speak?
Yeah. The curious comment, you just reminded me of a great thing I posted the other day, Ted Lasso. It was like, instead of getting judgmental, get curious.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he did in that movie, which I actually have also begun to work towards, is just open dialogue with your players. And we did something last year where I assigned, each coach had like 5 to 7 players. And
Hmm.
every 2 weeks, each coach, myself included, was scheduled to meet with, like if you were in my group,
Said
I would
group.
meet, I would
Yeah.
meet with
Yeah.
you. Like, Ryan, what are you doing? What would you like to do? Let's go to Starbucks. Great. And we would just go and talk about whatever it was that you wanted to talk about. And by doing that, was inviting just comfortability with having a conversation with me that didn't have to entail, like, every time they come and talk to me, it has to be something, controversial. Like, I wanted them
Right.
to get to know me. I wanted to get to know them a little bit. And we would switch people. We switched people at the semester break. And so that's one way of that that's one example. Um, every game day and even every practice day, I would leave the coach's locker room door open,
Mm.
so that if they wanted to walk in, they could. Like, I was just trying to create an environment where they felt comfortable enough to be able to come and speak to me. And I think some people do more than others, just because it's whether they spend more time with me, they have a more mature perspective. Whatever the case may be, some people just
Yeah.
have more comfortability with coming in to see me, and others don't. But there's also a point in time where it's either like where I end and you have to begin. Like, it
Yeah.
can't all be me. Like, it has to be a two-way street. Communication is a two-way street. And so there's just going to be times where it just kind of doesn't matter what I do, what I say, how I am, what I stand for. If I'm going to end, and then somebody else just does not want to begin.
Yeah. 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 And I think that, like, I love the example of like one of encouraging like conversations like out of the office and everything, like environment matters, right? Like I think there's a level of comfortability, and then it goes back to, because I think connections and relationships is like the foundation of everything, because to
Yeah.
me that just boils down to like trust is like I was actually talking with a coach like yesterday, and they were describing a certain athlete, and they were like, I can just say certain things and she knows. And I was like, because she knows when you give a compliment, it's real. It's not like some fake, like, oh,
Yeah.
great job. It's like, oh, so it makes them actually genuinely feel really good. Vice versa, when you give them a correction and you're coaching them, it's like they know how to receive that because there is a relationship and a
Yeah.
connection built. And so I guess that was kind of, I was going to follow up of like how you go about really just building those connections, especially because I'm sure it starts back to like recruiting, right? Like before
Yeah.
they've even
Yeah.
actually gotten on campus. But what are some of the ways you said this year? You know, I know one of the examples you gave is like you've really been open. I think that was this year,
Yep.
in terms of like vulnerability. Yeah, like what are some of the other ways that like you try to like really encourage and draw people in and like get that connection with them?
Remembering important things in people's lives. And I don't do do it always, because you get 25 people and something slips through the cracks. But it's like, I have an athlete right now who is just struggling with a gastrointestinal issue that she just isn't feeling better. And I'm just making sure that I'm checking in with her,
Yeah.
whether it's every week, every few days, or if something's going on. I have one of my 2025s coming in who had a surgery today, actually. And I had it in my calendar yesterday to make sure to reach out to her yesterday, so that, like, I was showing my support. So it's like knowing what is important to each kid, and just reaching out like you would your friends or your
Yeah.
family, or so that's another example. And then just like that those are ways that you make deposits, but they're also deposits for you as well. Like, I'm real big
Yeah.
at making deposits, so that when it comes time when you do have to withdraw, whether it's like a hard conversation or whatever the case may be, that you've made enough deposits that you're not overdrawing and going into the red. And so I just try to find ways that I can all the time. Like, I try to wander around practice when they're warming up, and
Mm,
so I
mm.
work with the pitchers quite a bit, and I'm not around the position players as much as I'd like to, which I'm actually making adjustments to that this year. But it's just having conversations in the stretch, lines or whatever that they're doing. And yeah, so it's really just finding ways to figure out what's important to them and their families too. I've actually involved families more than I have. I don't know if that's a mistake or not. But like
Blessing and
I
a
do,
curse.
like I try to engage with the parents a little bit more. And I think it's easier too, because like I'm at that age where I could be a parent of a college kid now,
Yeah.
so like they're my peers now, whereas before
Yeah.
they were either older than me, and at some point they'll be younger than me. But like yeah, so I think it's just engaging with their family unit, especially like in the recruiting process, for sure. Like, and being okay fielding more calls from parents, because I understand that the parents are just trying to raise their kids and figure it all out with them.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with a parent. He was, about it could have been a sticky situation, but it really wasn't. And I explained to him, I said, this is, I don't mind if you're reaching out about, the health of your daughter or the well-being
Right.
of your daughter, but at some point she's got to take over to do like some of the lifting. But if there's things that like she's, that you feel like can describe a little bit more, because he has a little bit more understanding of the nuance, that's fine.
Yeah.
This parent was totally like, thank you for letting me know. And I think it's like talking to parents, educating parents, and that kind of thing. So it's just, I guess, a mishmash of many things.
Yeah, I think too, like going down the rabbit hole is like, I just think a lot of parents just don't know.
Yeah.
I think that they're like so left in the dark, and because it is like your child is there's a big element of like wanting to take over, so to speak. And it's like I think that's really, really, really powerful actually of like, hey, I don't mind you calling me, but like here's the line in the sand. So if it's about
Yeah.
X, then like that's awesome. But like if it's about Y, like they need to be coming to me with this. Like
Yeah.
that should not we should not be spending
Yeah. You're
time.
right.
I
Yeah.
I, I think
They don't know.
I think that's really, really, really powerful. And then going back to is two things is when you're talking about like wandering around practice is makes me think of, I don't know who said this. I heard it somewhere. It's like going back to like human beings and human behavior. It's like we all have the need to be seen and feel
Yes.
heard, right? Like, and I think that just it's so funny that them being seen is like some really meaningless conversation of like my icebreaker, like when I go in like with some of the teams is like they all know it's a big joke now, but I'm like, what'd you eat for dinner last night? And it's like, like it's fun and playful, but it's like
Yeah.
there is this like, hey, we don't always have to talk sports, right? Like just like what'd you eat?
Yeah.
Oh, did you cook it? Did you go out to get it? And
Yeah.
it's like it's weird how like those just meaningless conversations bridge that gap because they feel seen and they feel heard.
Yeah.
So I think that that's like really interesting, really powerful. What do you feel like is I think going back to like the emotional side of things, because I talk again, human beings, I like we're emotional creatures. And it's probably evolved. So if it has, I'd love to hear just kind of like your take from the inside of like the evolution of college athletes like emotional needs. Has it always been pretty steady and consistent of like here's the one or two things I really try to hone in on? Has it evolved from like when you started up until now?
It's a great question. And my first thought is, my knee jerk is absolutely. But then I think deeper and I'm like, has it really changed or has my perspective changed? And
That's good.
has what has what we used to do or how we maybe in the past have handled situations just because we handled it and people accepted it, was that really the right way
Yeah.
of doing things? You think about the days of the days of coaches like screaming in the faces of athletes or people running until they puke or whatever the old school,
Right.
Bobby Knight throwing a chair on the court and things like that. And I just don't know that that flies anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't
Right.
think people want to play in that kind of environment anymore. Like they want a inclusive, collaborative environment. And I think so I do think things have evolved. I think we might have needed this before, but
Hmm.
we just you grow accustomed to things, right? Like your
Yeah.
body adapts. If you're a runner, your body adapts to the stresses you're putting on it. Maybe perhaps emotionally you adapt. Like if you're getting abused, you
Uh,
adapt to how you do that. So maybe we just adapted, but it really wasn't what was in the best interest for humans. And
right.
so perhaps now with and I think this is my personal opinion, but I think COVID spearheaded a lot of things because I think a lot of us were sitting around doing nothing, like actually putting some thoughtful time into like life. And I think people started to figure out what was really important. I mean, which is why you're seeing more people who don't want to go back to the office because they want to they're like, look, we have like one run on this planet. Like we want to you know
Yeah.
and I think that's really what it comes down to. It's like if I can spend time with my 5-year-old at home, then I'm going to do that and take a meeting at home instead of driving and sitting an hour and a half in traffic and you in Georgia and Atlanta, no traffic.
Yeah. Whew.
So but I think that the perspective, whatever, I think it has evolved. And I think but it's become you know expectations of athletes right now is such that that there's going to be a mentally healthy culture and that's what they want, and that's what's important. So I have definitely seen that. And then it's just learning what their needs are. I mean, the NCAA is coming down with minimums of mental health professionals that need to
Mm.
be on staff for athletes. So like, I just think people are recognizing this. I think everything just goes whether, like, I don't think this is a phase. I think that this is a transformation.
Yeah. Do you fear, has it ever, and maybe you've not thought about this or thought about this, is right? Like you talked about the one extreme, like the Bobby Knights of the world, that was just very like corporal punishment, right? Like of just, yeah. Have you thought about it like trending too far in the other way to where
Yes.
it's like now it's like there has to be a balance because again, going back like I think like kids crave discipline, right? At some level. And so there has to be some firmness, some like stake in the ground, so to speak. Have you seen programs or coaches just maybe out of fear, right? Like of losing a job or
Yeah.
whatever it is, kind of trend too far, and it's like like you got to bring it back because there has to be some level of discipline. You can't just let the team run wild, right?
Yeah, no, it's such a great point. And that's why I think we're in a transformation, but when you're in transformation, you're still trying to figure out like the
Chaos.
best ways to do things. And like, I think the human condition is such that we are always seeking pleasure or ease of things, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's best for us in the long
Mm,
run. Like, if I wanted to sit down and eat my favorite ice cream on the couch every single day and watch TV and not get up and not move because I was feeling a little tired, like in time, eventually that, even though that feels good, it's not what's best for me, not for my
right.
health, not for anything. So I think that may be the case as well, exactly what you're saying. Like maybe all of like the feeling good and we all want to feel good, but like maybe that's not gonna help you lead to growth as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be some adversity involved. And I think if people are coming from a good place, like it's about learning perspective and it's learning what growth entails, I mean, you can't train to do anything without going through hardships, whether it's
Right.
physically or emotionally. So I definitely think that, yeah, at some point, everything everything sort of either comes around again or evens out. Look at like styles and like mom jeans are back in style.
Yeah.
Like something always kind of comes back, but maybe it comes back better. Maybe the mom jeans are created better than they were. You know what I mean? But so like, yeah, definitely think about that. And I think about all my colleagues who, like I mentioned at the beginning, like you have your end of year evaluations, and then administrators are feeling like they have to adhere to things, and then maybe putting power in a student athlete's hands that maybe that might seem like the right thing to do, but maybe that's not really teaching anybody anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I
Because I
don't,
mean, it's even I literally a conversation. It made me think of like because talking a lot about growth and you talked about like adversity and I think just hearing no in life like is
yeah,
powerful and literally a conversation with an athlete yesterday it was a relationship thing, right? And it was like, but I thought like this was like could be the one, right? And it was like one of like first relationships and I was like and they're like, well maybe like I just need to put my guard up, and I was like, no, like I don't think so. Like you went about it the right way. It was like this person just decided to go in a different direction. I was like, if you just guard up like never again, then like now you're not going to get anywhere. But it's like, what can you take away from this?
yeah,
Hearing the
oh,
no, hearing the stay, feeling this rejection, that's okay. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel those things. Now, how do we grow out of this?
yeah. I think it teaches hearing no, being rejected teaches you a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
Like and like because it teaches you like where your triggers are and what exactly is the crux of the issue, and then you can go to work on that. But without having any of that, you never know, and you never
Yeah.
know where those weak spots rear their ugly heads and affect you in life some way. So you can be thankful for the opportunities that knock you on your butt.
Yeah. And then it's like, I think it helps you overcome, like, I just firmly believe the ultimate, most, I think kids think that their ultimate fear is fear of failure. And I'm like, I'm like, what are you really scared of? And they're like being judged. I'm like, so that's really the root of it is you're scared of like what people will think if you strike out in the bottom of the seventh, if you miss the shot, like whatever it is. And so I think that sense of rejection helps you thicken the skin, so to speak, a little bit of like, hey, I'm still alive.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna play again. I get another chance at this.
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, like I think that ultimately like leads to growth, which is kind of what I wanted to ask you is like, how have you, and I'm sure like kind of like your definition, so to speak, has evolved a little bit, like defined growth like for you? Like what does that meant? Like what does that word, so to speak, like have meant for you?
Oof, that's a really good question. I think it means, I'm having a hard time coming to finding the words for this, because I want to say it helps. Like, I love to advance to be the best version of yourself. And that's to me what I think growth is ultimately. But like, I also think that sometimes, you know, like when you say the best version of yourself, like it says that there's a possibility for failure too. And I don't think that growth, like I think growth needs to encompass failure as well. Like I think growth is learning, um, like learning to have a strong sense of self to be able to overcome all of the to be able to be like have the live with the human condition and live with
Yeah,
life and all the things that people throw your way. But it's being your best self helps you to do that. I think it helps you to grow. Like that's what I'm personally working on is, having a stronger sense of self when there is criticism, or, like I'm a human being as well. And I do have a lot of life experience and I've seen a lot of things to be able to pull things apart, but I still have my own insecurities. We all do.
absolutely.
And I think that it's just learning how to better deal with this so that you can have the best life for yourself in the time that you're here.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I know, like, sometimes I feel like it gets thrown around like super cliche of like, be the best version of you. But I really do think that it boils back to like identity, right? It's like growing to be like, I kind of define it as like your 1.0 and 2.0. So you're growing to be that
Yeah.
2.0 version of
Yeah.
yourself. And then people are like, what do you do when you get there? I'm like, then there's like a 3.0, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just
Yep.
this constant, like, you get to define what that version of you looks like. You don't have
Yep.
to, you know, be succumb to what society says or your parents say or your coaches say or your peers say. But I think a lot of people just like kind of like, and that's the reason I ask is I think a lot of people just kind of throw around that word of like growth, but I'm like, it's really ultimately is just like exactly what you were saying a little bit too, is like growing to who you
Yeah.
actually want to be and making sure that that's who you want to be and not just some like outside imposed like version of
Yeah.
you.
And that can change and it's
Oh,
okay. And that's what I've actually spoken in a master's program, like one of our sport admin programs here to younger students. And I talked about how like sometimes you pivot in life and it's actually a really good thing. I mean, after a very successful season at St. John's, it was my 12th season. And I stepped away from coaching because I was just so burned out. And I knew that at that moment I needed to pivot. Like I needed to do something. And
mm,
that's really where I got heavily into my life coaching practice. And I became a personal trainer. And that was how I was able to live for that year. And then the BC job opened up, long story, but I needed time to just be. And like, I was able to walk away not defining myself by my profession,
yeah.
and it's really interesting. Like Nike, years ago, I learned this. I don't know if they still do this, but every 4 years, I believe they move around like their top executives to different, like you might be in China now, you might come back to the US
Oh, yeah.
to keep like kind of like life fresh and maybe and so because you can become stale, like things become stale, like bread becomes stale after however. And so yeah, so I think that change is good, it's often needed. But people get so stuck, and people feel like, and there are circumstances where you maybe change, my life is a little more flexible maybe than others because I don't have children. I can kind of like move and shake the way I want to. That's the way I
Yeah.
define my life. But you can change. You can always do something different, and you don't have to feel like you're defined as, the stay-at-home mom or the softball coach, or if sometimes people may just fall out of love with their sport and want to go do something else, and that's okay too. Like, I mean, you can be the best version of yourself and still walk away from something and adjust.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, I don't know what percentage, but I feel like a lot of people fear that change because their pushback is like, well, life's not that bad. I'm like, I'm not saying it's bad, but if the if
Yeah.
the if the reason to live is to grow, right? Like you don't want to be 30 and act 5. Like you want to grow and mature and experience life. And so I think it's the same thing of like encouraging people. It's like just because you're making changes does not mean that things are bad. It means that like there's a new level, there's a completely different, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that again, actually going back to like our conversation about curiosity is one of the things I like really encourage everybody. I'm like, if you had 30 seconds and you were in an elevator around somebody that like you admire, so it could be a sports figure, it could be somebody in business, like whatever, and it's like you only had time to ask them one question, like do you know your go-to question? And so encouraging people to kind of like have that, you never know when you're going to bump into this person. And so mine is always like, what do I perceive to be true that isn't? And so I think that like if somebody's here playing the game of life, sports, business, whatever, here, and I'm here, they're going to look at me and go, I used to think that 10 years ago too. Let me help you out a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it doesn't mean things are bad, but like there is a totally different perspective out there.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. So what pulled you, you had kind of sound like a 12-month kind of 1 year break. What pulled you back into like coaching?
Well, um, for the first 6 months, I did not look at anything softball related. Like I just needed time. Like when you burn out from something, you just kind of need time to just be.
Space. Yeah.
And um that year I had been inducted into the Providence College Hall of Fame. And so the ceremony was, I think it was February.
Uh-huh.
And so I think getting back to that ceremony, I was like, okay, I see you, softball. Like
Little spark.
I'm here. I am again. I didn't like abandon you forever. I just, and then I was, just started following softball a little bit more. I went to a Providence game. I think they had like an alumni weekend. I was like, oh wow, I'm actually able to go. And then one of my seniors at St. John's texted me and said, Coach, I know, you're not with us anymore, but it's our senior day. We'd really like you to be here for us. And I went and I was sitting there and I'm like, wow, I belong on like, it was weird being on that side of the fence. And I was like, I
Yeah.
belong on that other side of the fence. And so I thought, it's going to take the right job. And if I don't find it, that's okay. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna, it won't be too terrible. And ironically, the BC job opened up and I was like, you know what? My parents are here. Um, and I've always kind of been drawn to like when I was younger, I remember saying to my dad, someday I'm going to live in Boston. Like he was like holding my hand, taking me to a Red Sox game. And I was
Yeah.
like, someday I'm going to live in Boston. And I was just like, you know what? The opportunity might be presented right now. And this was the only job I applied to. And so, yeah,
Interesting.
yep. And so if I got it, I was going to accept it. And if I didn't, I would have continued on. And, who knows where I would be right now, but here I am. So,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a small world, right? Funny how like the universe
yeah.
works out of like something you remember when you were a child and like here you are like actually living it. So when you came in I mean, obviously, I guess like how had your perspective, I was going to use the word philosophy, but I didn't like that word. Is like how had your perspective from like coaching kind of like stint one for like, over a decade. And when you came in, it's like, okay, like I've able to like taken a step back, seen the world a little bit differently, got a little bit of clarity. Now I'm going to go in and like, how is that perspective different from like the first one?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is when you're sitting on an airplane and they say, if the oxygen mask falls from the ceiling, be sure to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping others.
Yeah.
And so I think that sums it up
Mm,
perfectly. It's like, I need to make sure that I am taking care of myself so that I can be the best person for everybody around me to be able to complete the job instead of running myself into the ground, which I'm still guilty of. Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I at least am aware of when I'm doing it. Instead of closing down the ballpark at a recruiting event, like I'll be like, I'm done. I'm going to get
Yeah.
food and I'm going back and getting a good night's sleep. But yeah, so I think it's taking care of myself so I can be at my best for others. Like I don't see that as a selfish, but maybe it is a selfish move, but it makes me better for others, and that's great. So So I would say that, and then helping others to see that as well, helping others to take care of themselves and their mental health so they too can be at their best. And then just having a taste of being out in the world. I mean, I worked with a lot of different types of people in my life coaching practice. I worked with a lot of creative types, which was
Mm.
interesting. Like I worked with a poet from Harvard. I'm like, oh my God, in my talk about insecurity, I'm like, am I going to be able to help somebody who is like smart and like does something, but like you learn that their lives are very similar in terms of like they're still the same people, they still have the same insecurities as you. And so I just think having a broader perspective of like, we're all in this together, we all have the
Yeah.
same types of like fears, and you're right, fear of failure, fear of judgment, insecurity, worry, like we all are there. And I think just knowing it's like the collective suffering for some reason for me. I was like,
Yeah.
I get it. And I just wanted to be a part of making that a better place for people.
Yeah. I going back to it's one of the things like trying to help people understand is I think that like one, language matters, words matter. Most people don't know what words actually mean. They just throw things out there. But I think going back to the word of like selfish, I think it's like just been hardwired for so many people that that has such a negative connotation to it. But I think that like circumstances matter too, right? Like there's an element of like, I think we all have to look in the mirror and be like, all right, like I'm making this decision for me. Is that considered selfish? Probably, but like that's what's in the best interest of me right now. So long as like I kind of like follow, I was like morally and ethically, you're not like harming somebody, right? Like you're not impeding on somebody. You're not lying, cheating, stealing,
Exactly.
beating
Exactly.
somebody up to move forward in life. It's like this is what helps me move forward. And so I think that
Yep.
that's like really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, then if you're taking care of yourself, that's selflessly throwing a better you into the world to be around other people and maybe perhaps just be more meaningful, insightful, better to be around for other people. So,
And it thinks of, I think, was it this morning or yesterday morning? It was like the analogy of like to this kind of concept is like a coach told me is like, Ryan, like how much water are you pouring in the holy bucket, right? Like in the sense of like you're
yeah,
doing all the things, but there's holes in the bottom of it. This is like you're not getting anything out of it. It's like you got to plug the holes first. You got to fix you
yeah,
first before you can actually like fill the bucket up.
right.
Um, so yeah, very interesting. All right, last question for you. I didn't give you the cheat sheet on this one.
Okay.
So if you're in a stadium with 100,000 people and you could
Okay.
only leave them with one message, what would
Ooh.
your message be?
My favorite message is to treat people kindly and understand that everybody is fighting some type of a battle. Like I love that theme. Like it would be something around along those lines. It's like I always tell this story to my team about perspective. You're sitting on what is out there, 85. You're on 85, you're in a parking lot. And or is it 75? I don't know what's down.
75, 85. Yeah, same. Yeah.
So, and this one guy or girl goes into the emergency breakdown lane and speeds by all the traffic. Goodbye, peace out, I'm speeding by. And you're sitting in your car and you're like, like, cursing this person out. Like, who does this person think they are? And, you're mad, whatever. But would it make a difference if you learned that that person was speeding in that breakdown lane because it was a family member of theirs that was in an accident up ahead? And so it's like, for me, this is like one of the best ways of showing
Yeah.
people perspective when you want to make a judgment on what someone's doing. So before you judge, I just would get as many facts as possible, because everybody is really, we're all in this together, like, and we're all fighting different demons and different battles.
Yeah. And I think it's taken me, it's like try to maybe this is not a good quality. I don't know, but like give people the benefit of the doubt. Like the silly example is just like, some people may be eating somewhere and the server's not super talkative or whatever. And they're just like, well, that wasn't like great service. But like, again, like maybe something happened to a sibling or to a parent or something like that. So it's like, why make a full judgment off of like, well, I'm gonna only give them $1 because like,
Yeah, yeah,
so I
exactly,
think of like just giving people is like, you never know. You do never know.
exactly.
I like that a lot. I like that
But
a lot.
it's hard not to take it's hard not to take things personally though,
Yeah.
like, because your first thought is they don't like me, they don't like, and instead of doing that, it's like, well, ask the question, like, is that really true? Or like, what is really else going on? Like, it's find alternatives because, a lot of us have a tendency to go to the negative first, find alternatives.
Yeah. Well, not to go down the rabbit hole, but like I think that going back to like human psychology is like I think it's Tony Robbins that's kind of like famously for quoting saying this is like you don't have to search for what's wrong because that your brain is built for survival. So it's naturally wired to find the thing, all the things out, the danger, the threats. And so we're like almost wired to think that way versus rewiring ourselves to, not always think that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And it's
So
like thinking about possible alternatives. You could think, yeah, the server hates me. That is an alternative. They may.
yeah.
But there could also be 40 other alternatives as to why the server is behaving in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And alternatives is makes me think of like tying it to like again, since a lot of our conversation has been about growth, is, I think a lot of people want to give up quickly on like maybe growing towards something. And, you hear them say it's like, especially like people with like diets or working out, like I've tried everything. And it's like, well, name me 5 things that you've tried. And they name like 2. It's like, well, I don't know if you tried everything quite
Yeah,
yet.
exactly. Exactly.
There's a lot of other ways to like get in
Exactly.
shape aside from like the 2 things that you tried that didn't work.
Yep. Exactly.
So I love it. Well, this has been awesome. I really appreciate like you coming on. Like I always tell everybody kind of in closing is, I just feel like stories are what move people and everybody gets tired of me flapping my gums. And so it's like finding as many people as possible with just different perspectives on the world because I think people relate to not everybody's going to relate to me, just like not everybody's going to relate to you, but there are people that will relate to like different stories. And so that's
For
kind of the
sure.
purpose of the podcast. So I definitely appreciate you kind of coming on, sharing your stories and just the growth and evolution and what coaching's looking like and like how you stay growing and stay curious is like I think the best way to like sum it up. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me and for allowing me to speak about something that's really important to me and that I think is an important thing in life for all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Until next time, everybody. Peace.